Hi there, and welcome to our first episode of the new year 2021 of Future of XYZ. Today we have Kate Williams, the CEO of 1% for the Planet, a global network of businesses and individuals committed to giving back to environmental nonprofits. Kate, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Great way to start the year.
A great way to start the year indeed. And I think we're going to be talking about the future of commitment, which seems an even better way as people come off their New Year's resolutions and try to hold firm on the 7th of January, to talking about what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic and one we think about a lot at 1%, but it is timely.
Exactly. So let's just get into it. I mean, what is, from your perspective, given this topic being chosen, what is the future of commitment, and what is commitment in the context that we're going to be talking about it?
Yeah, so for 1% for the Planet, commitment is about committing your 1%. So at a broad level, our belief is that everyone has a 1%. Every business, every person has a 1%. And that can be literal in terms of your sales or your revenues or your income or your time. And it can also, we also sometimes use it figuratively, like, how do you sort of give that extra 1% of, spirit to those around you? The commitment piece, so you make that commitment of your 1%, and the way 1% for the Planet works is that we actually certify that giving commitment, that more literal commitment each year. And so we're kind of accountability partners is one way to look at it. And so, at a really fundamental level, 1% for the Planet is about making a commitment and then stepping into a community that supports you in that commitment and that celebrates that commitment and that amplifies that commitment because everyone else is doing their 1% as well. So there's a lot of ways in which commitment is a really beautiful thing for 1% for the Planet members.
I think commitment is such an interesting word as well, because committing to something obviously requires an intention being set, which is a lot of what we talk about in the beginning of years, right? Setting an intention, but you just mentioned accountability and partnership and accountability. Oftentimes, you set a resolution and you make a commitment and you can fall off very quickly. So when we think about commitment in the context of 1% for the Planet or any kind of charitable giving really, or anything, to have that accountability partner is important.
Absolutely. And, it is interesting to talk about it at this time of year because we all have set goals for ourselves or set intentions for ourselves that we've really wanted and been very genuine in setting them. But then, when the dark day comes or the tired day comes or the day comes when we're, not feeling, that we're quite up to the challenge, we may kind of either lose sight of that intention or just lose track of it altogether in the swirl of our lives. And I think one of the wonderful things about 1% for the Planet is it creates a framework where you can make a commitment and you can have our support in setting that commitment. So we've said, hey, like based on all of what we know, like 1% is a very real amount to give. Like it's not nothing when a company gives 1% of sales. Like that's a huge thing, but it's also, you can wrap your head around it. Like it's not 99%.
Right.
So we help to set that intention, and then throughout the year, and it's an annual commitment, we have a lot of ways to say, hey, here's a great thing that you could give to. Hey, here's a great event where you could connect with other 1% members. Lots of ways that we, add context and engagement around making that commitment. And then at the end of the year, there's a certification process where, we're looking at like, okay, this is what you set out as your 1%. And hey, awesome, here's how you've tracked toward it. And what's so fun is that we then get to celebrate that because the story we tell is of the total giving of all the 1%, and it's a huge number. And so it's really great to have everyone able to feel that their commitment laddered up to this really big outcome.
Well, and I think it's wonderful. And I know, obviously, we've talked about this, the commitments that companies and individuals seem to be making, despite the terrible, no good, very bad year that was 2020, seem to be growing. So that would portend that, let's talk about the near future of commitments right now. It would seem that people are making bigger commitments than before to at least environmental causes. Does that seem right?
I think so. And, I think one of the things that we have seen and that I would imagine a lot of people can relate to is a lot of times it can feel really overwhelming to know what to do in many situations, but relative to the environment, it can feel hard to know, like, what can I do? What can I as a company do? It's so big. So even my effort in this or that area, is it enough? And what we really try to do is, you know, sort of clarify the fog of that overwhelming feeling and just say, yeah, actually, doing your 1% is a really important step. So you do it this year, you do it the next year, you add it to the literally thousands of other members who are doing it, and it creates big change. And moreover, like so many things, it creates this dynamic momentum. So you are then making your commitment to give your 1%, but as part of a community, you're then also accessing relationships with people and learning from them, like, oh, and I can also do this and this. And so suddenly what was overwhelming becomes something you can wrap your head around, something you can start taking steps toward, and something fun as you develop the relationship. So fun and rewarding. And we are definitely seeing a lot of engagement. So, last year was a, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year in many ways, but it was also a really remarkable year because I think for so many of us, it created some clarity around, like, okay, things can go bad and get hard fast. So there's really no time like the present to make commitments to what we believe we want the future to be. And 1% for the planet is a really, really nice, clear pathway to make that commitment to a future that's different than what you're seeing right now.
Which is so amazing. And you mentioned something else. We've talked about accountability in the context of commitment. You just mentioned community. And that community in the context of commitment seems very, very, I think it kind of goes in partnership with accountability in many ways, right?
Very much so, in part because that's where the kind of fun and humanity of it comes in. I mean, whether it's a business member or an individual member, it's people making decisions. And as people, we are largely social beings. And, making a decision to make a big commitment, because again, 1% is a big commitment. When other people are making that commitment, kind of reinforces it. It's like peer pressure in the best sense of the term. And I think also because the way our model is set up, everyone has a 1%. So if it's a really big company or an individual committing with their babysitting money and everything in between, everyone's giving their 1%. So it's like fully democratic, everyone's in it with the same level of commitment. And that's really inspiring because then you can sort of and think, wow, well, if they can do it, I can certainly do it. And you may be looking at people bigger or smaller, but no matter what you're doing, there's inspiration and reinforcement from that community.
It's so interesting. I hadn't thought about the fact that that equalizing effect of taking a percentage like 1% is, and saying, if you can commit, whether it's, a child with their babysitting money or one of the world's largest corporations, and obviously one of the founders of 1% for the planet is Yves Chouinard, who was the founder of Patagonia as well. So there is a stable and a cadre of giant companies and mid-sized companies who have always made these commitments. And then you start seeing that effect of the equalizer saying, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And if the young girl with the babysitting money can do it, I can do it too, because it does, to your point, amplify the effectiveness of that giving.
Absolutely. I that's one of the things I love most about it, is it truly, like, we don't have higher level members or lower level members. We certainly have members of different sizes who are, their 1% totals a bigger or smaller number, but it's 1% and they're all doing it. And so when we have like our annual event, which we look forward to hosting again when people can gather in person, our global summit, it's such an amazing thing because there's this incredible energy in the room because everyone's in it to the same degree. And, anyone talking to anyone else is making the same commitment, and they have very, different industries, different size revenues, all of these like interesting points of diversion in terms of how they're set up. But there's this really significant shared common ground in their 1% commitment. And that's really cool because then you start having these kind of previously unlikely connections that are, suddenly become super logical and productive.
Well, it's interesting because actually, let's go back to this kind of the future of commitment. And if the future of commitment is really about accountability, partnership, community, inspiration, where are we going? I mean, is this a movement in the sense, I mean, people have always made commitments, but if we're thinking about commitment in the sense of what we're talking about, which is in some ways giving to things bigger than ourselves and making meaningful impact, through those commitments. What does the future of commitment look like in your opinion? From a business standpoint, specifically an impact perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the values of commitment, which speaks to my answer to your question, which I'll get to, is that when you make a commitment, you still have to act on it, but you've kind of exerted your decision-making energy already. So you're not like, ideally it becomes easier and easier. Like if you've studied, sort of habit formation or like willpower, like all those things take a lot of energy. So by making a commitment and becoming part of a community in which you sort of bring that commitment to life on an annual basis, you've made it easier for yourself to do something that you want to do all the time. And so the future of commitment that I would like to see is that these kinds of commitments that are good and necessary for planet and people just become integrated. They're part of what it means to run a business. So things like paying taxes or having financial statements or tracking sales or whatever, the things that you need to do to understand and run your business and have your business continue to exist. You've committed to doing those, maybe because the IRS told you that you had to, but also just because there are some kind of accepted business practices. 1% for the planet, like we should become one of those types of commitments, because it just becomes part of the fabric of how you do business. It just becomes part of the fabric of how you lead your life. And I think, one of the features of that is the fact that it's a commitment, so you're integrating it in, you're making it habitual, you're, kind of eliminating the energy needed to sort of kind of go through that, like deciding like, should I wear this or that? Should I do this or that? Should I give this year or not? It's like, no, it's part of who I am and it's part of what I do is that I give. And, and that's really when a commitment becomes, core. And I think, that's the future that I would like to see of commitment, is that our type of model creates a way that it really truly becomes integrated for the long term.
I absolutely adore that. So let's explore further out. Like if we say that happens, I mean, if that vision of the future of commitment, Kate, is realized, what then? How will we know if that vision has been achieved or success has been achieved?
That's a very good question. So our North Star as an organization, the sort of big goal that we're headed toward is to be the most recognized environmental community, which may sound like that's kind of an interesting one. And the reason we selected that is that like consumer and company awareness of 1% for the planet as a brand, as a strategy, means that we've gotten that kind of critical mass of engagement globally. And for us, that's something that we can track and it's something we can understand. And it would indicate to us that enough companies are doing it, that it's not just a sort of sidebar movement, it's becoming more integrated into business, into the economy, into how, businesses run. I would say, some of what we're seeing this year has been super heartening because, this was a hard year economically for not across the board, but for a lot of companies of certain sizes and in certain industries. And we had more new members join than we have had in any previous year. And so, that to me says that there's a beginning to see enough value in this, that it's not just something that you do when times are fat. It's something that you do because it's the right thing to do when times are hard. And when you're getting a sort of close-up look of what can happen globally, think climate change, when, things take effect in a really quick global way.
It's great. And so let's talk about just quickly. So commitment from a numbers perspective, you said it's, more companies have onboarded in 2020 than in past years. I mean, from a total numbers perspective of businesses, how many globally are we talking about are now invested? And just to give listeners a little bit of context.
Yeah, we have more than 4,000 companies globally. And we had more than 1,000 join this year.
Wow.
And yeah. And we have
LVG and Co included, of course.
yes, thank you. And we've certified about 28 million in giving, and we annually certify the giving for the prior year, so there's a bit of a lag on that, but it's still, it like is trending higher. Our goal is, and one of the things we sort of talk about internally is like mission 10,000. Like, how do we get to the point where we have 10,000 members, where we have 20,000 members? Like, how do we set ourselves up to, operate in that way? Because we really believe in, this isn't true for all mission or purpose-driven companies, but for us, or organizations, for us, growth is how we drive more giving and engagement, and our North Star really clarifies that. So we are really thinking hard about that, and how to just build this robust community where everyone's giving their 1%, because we just see how valuable that is.
And from a commitment perspective on 1% side, obviously, because it is always a two-way street, people and organizations are committing 1% of revenues or some other amount of money to you. In turn, you commit to build a community, but of environmentally passionate, sustainably minded, people-oriented social impact organizations. But let's talk about also where that commitment goes towards the nonprofit side, because obviously, the ultimate aim is the impact in sustainability and climate change and these kinds of things.
Yeah. So just in terms of how our model works, a little bit of nitty gritty, the money does not come through us. So actually the commitment is to us, but it's also to the nonprofits themselves, which we love. And that's like really also fundamental to our model. So when a company joins, they pay a small dues fee to us, but then they're giving the lion's share of their 1% to the environmental nonprofits that we kind of sustain as a network. So we vet those nonprofits, we onboard them, we get information about them to understand their impact, how they work. We do, one of the things that's fairly unique to 1% for the Planet is we also look at their ability to sort of partner and support the members who are giving to them, because unlike a grant from a foundation where you may be required to report at certain intervals, working with a corporate partner, it's going to be a little more organic and may require and create more wonderful opportunities for volunteering with that, with those employees, or sharing stories, or things like that. So we really work on that partnership side as well. So,
which I think is really cool, because the commitment isn't only a financial commitment, right? You come back to what you said, the long-term goal of commitment is, which is really about kind of living and breathing this value system. And so the commitment becomes about something much more than the 1% financial donation. It becomes about engaging, building relationships, and doing the work somewhat.
Exactly. And this is where it gets, when people heard like the future of commitment, they might have thought, oh, they're going to talk about relationships. And in a way, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about, because it is the way our model is set up, is that there are relationships that are built across members within the community, but then really the core relationship is the giving relationship between members and the nonprofits that they give to. And there's some really incredible stories of how those relationships have just created so much more than the dollars exchange, the dollars for impact exchange. There's just a ton of value in those relationships.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and obviously really needed as we think about climate change as just as a catch-all right now, to not go too far into that topic, right? But with the planet requires some serious commitment from all of us. To that end, Kate, I'd love to wrap with the question of commitment at an individual level. If any of the people listening or watching are thinking what they can do to commit to the planet, whether that's through 1% or otherwise. What sound words of advice would you leave people with as we think about the future of commitment?
Yeah, we actually are relaunching our individual member program this year. So, that would really be, something worth looking into is, creates a way that you can identify your 1% as an individual. And then we have some different ways that you can give that. Either, we do all this sort of hard work and create a portfolio of nonprofits that your money would go to, or you can identify the nonprofits you want to give to. We're also adding some things like a giving circle, so you could have that community. So, or if you want to just like make a commitment and not have to deal with a lot of that, you can do that. So, we really try and sort of meet people where they are, but everyone shares in making that commitment. So our individual member program, which is on our website, is definitely worth checking out, and it's a great sort of low lift but high value, high engagement way that you can sort of stop feeling like, am I doing enough, or am I doing the right thing, and feel like you got some support in feeling really confident and engaged in supporting the planet, which feels really good.
It does feel really good. It's a commitment we can all get behind, I think.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, Kate, it is, we are all hoping that 2021 is going to be a better year than 2020 was. However, there are some bright spots, as you said, commitments being one of them, perhaps. And as we start this new year, we'll look ahead to hopefully the future of commitments growing and having greater impact. And so thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. So great to have this conversation.
Love it. Thanks, Kate.